Good morning. Good morning to this first breakfast session at the European Health Forum Gestein 2022. One of the most important meals of the day, breakfast. And we'll be talking about food, but hopefully you'll find time to also enjoy the breakfast, the food, and not just the words. Because you need actually to eat in order to enjoy the energy that it gives. And joining me here, three speakers in the panel, as you see, and we have two more speakers. They are not participants, they are actually speakers joining us from Copenhagen and Parma, both very rainy and dull places that they wish they would have been in Gestein, of course, but still. They're with us too. Joining me here physically is then five good speakers. But before we begin, or rather while I'll be presenting them, allow me to point to our Slido, because what we'll be talking about today is, of course, sustainable food and co-creating sustainable food systems. So what is sustainable food, and what do you think about when we talk about sustainable food? If you go to slido.com, you'll be able to see, using the hashtag Stella, our poll about sustainable food. And you'll be able also to use your analytical skills to try to figure out with 5 different cases, what would be the sustainable choice? Because a lot of what we'll be talking about today is obviously about choices also. So please go to slido.com and look at that, while maybe also unfolding your ears so that you can listen to our good speakers. Welcome. Joining us from outside Gestein, Domagoj Voss from EFSA. Welcome, Domagoj. Can you?
Yes, good morning. Happy to be with you.
Pekka Jokelainen from Copenhagen and One Health EJP. Is that the way Toxosource? And in my panel, Dorota Sinkovic of the EuroHealthNet, Solveig Langsrud from SafeConsume and Norfema, and Milka from obviously the European Public Health Alliance.
Lovely to be here.
Yeah. And without further ado, let's see, low environmental footprint, good for environment and health. So nothing about taste necessarily, but obviously should taste like something, I suppose. But we'll allow the Slido to continue while we kick off with the panel here. And the first of our different themes that we'll be diving into, and we'll be having 3 rounds, would be food trust. Because a lot of what we talk about when we talk about sustainable choices is, of course, also whether we trust the food that we eat, either from the sources or from the content. And especially on food trust, Domagoj and Milka has agreed to help us talk about food trust, and especially, of course, in a international and very globalized food system. What does trust actually mean, and how can we actually meaningfully talk about trust? And let's start with from Parma, Domagoj.
Thank you, Lars, and thanks again, and good morning to everyone. Yeah, I think a very interesting and difficult topic to start with, but I think the point is that it's not very easy when it comes to trust in food, because food is different, because in food you have both the passion and the duty component in a way. You have, eating is a pleasure, but you also need safe food and you want to trust the food chain. So it's not a simple task to gain trust and to talk about trust of consumers. That said, the most recent data, and at least when it comes to food risks, shows that the majority of the actors from farm to fork do enjoy quite high level of trust of citizens. This is particularly the case for scientists that work in the regulatory domain, consumer organizations, farmers, but EU national authorities, EU authorities, national authorities, and NGOs are up there as well. So I think the sheer fact that people are aware of the complexity of something like the food safety or the food systems in general show that there is an attention to this, and that we cannot simply boil down trust. Someone says, you know, is it just about knowing the producer or the company? It's not. You cannot boil it down to something that simple, because food is very multidimensional. So in general, I think there have been some positive trust in trends in the food risk area, and food industries have seen this as well. And I think it's a reflection of what we will be discussing today, that we are giving more and more attention to different facets of food. And it's not more just about safety or taste or nutrition. It's also about environmental impact, carbon footprint. So the story gets more complex, but as it gets more complex, there's also more room for, I think, improvement and work of everyone across the food chain. The other thing I always say, and is that we've just been through a pandemic that has seen a lot of, let's say, challenges to trust. Food has not been that central to the, let's say, the public discourse of pandemic. So we could say that, for example, food safety sort of persevered the pandemic, and that might also be one of the reasons that there has been an increased attention to the trust and the discussion on science, but not so much in the area of food safety. So I think we can build in the food on some lessons that we saw during the pandemic to apply them and prepare also for future challenges when it comes to food. So yeah. So much from me on this first thought.
Certainly a complex issue. So food is definitely not simply an additive, or maybe it's definitely not an additive. So Milka.
Well, I'm delighted that we are starting with the issue of trust, because the trust is key to positive relationships and central to how we behave and how we interact with others. And trust becomes even more critical in the times of crisis, and we do operate in the times of crisis. The multi-crisis that we now find ourselves in, so the pandemic, the climate, the cost of living, the food security, you name it, puts both the trust and the food systems under additional strain. And I think the trust in food systems is especially complex, or in food in general, because as Domagoj says, it involves a number of different stakeholders, and it involves a number of factors. I would just like to point out to a recent research conducted by the EIT Food Trust Tracker project that surveyed 20,000 people in 18 countries in the European region. And apparently trust in the food systems actors is highest when it comes to farmers, and then retailers, and then followed by manufacturers and governments. Well, Domagoj is stressing scientists and consumers, and that's a whole other kind of section of stakeholders. But I would also like to make a point here that kind of trust in farmers and retailers that is in the leading position is actually only about neutral. So we have to do a lot of good work to earn trust. When it comes to different countries, the Finns, Spaniards, and Brits actually enjoy the highest trust in their food system. And in 2018 and 19, when this study has started, the lowest trust in the food system was in France, Belgium, and Germany. And now the lowest trust is actually taken over by Czechs and Turks. People are most confident in food taste and food safety, which is a good sign for EFSA, I would say. And then it is followed by healthiness, authenticity, and sustainability as the last. So that's telling. And so starting off this discussion, I would like to stress that only when trust is strong, we can take people on board, and we can lead towards a change in behavior and towards healthier and more sustainable food systems.
Well, you also then touch upon a very important issue, which is that trust evolves. It is not a sort of a static element that you can simply count on. And while trust in farmers might be high or neutral.
Or
high,
neutral, yeah.
Neutral high. It's not a constant. And we have a food system that's very much evolving too. how can we then, I mean, even with EFSA, Domagoj doing his perfect job, doing what they can, how can we then continue to maintain that trust? What's the needed elements if we're coming from a starting point that's only neutral?
Yeah, well, trust is a very sensitive thing, a very fine and complex phenomenon. And unlike or despite the common narrative, it cannot be built. We can't grab bricks and cement and build trust. We have to earn it. We have to deserve it. By we, I mean each of us stakeholders. And we can only deserve trust based on our competence, on our honesty, and on reliability. However, we operate in a swirling nightmare of information quicksand. So we operate in a world where we have never had such access to information and knowledge, and yet we have never had such low levels of trust or distrust, a lack of awareness, and our behavior is heavily influenced by misinformation. So to close that trust gap and to earn trust, we must keep translating science into, let's say, digestible packages or pieces of information that people can make sense of. But that's just the first step. To earn trust, we need to persist, we need to be honest, we need to be reliable, and we need to start listening before talking.
Listening before talking. We can see from the Slido that a lot have actually focused on the environmental part of sustainable food, which means, I suppose, also that it would be a really good idea to move on to the second question in the Slido, because sustainable choices, and when it comes to environmentally friendly choices, we have 5 different choices to be made, or 5 different types of foods. And you try to choose wisely. Well, this is like the supermarket. You go choose different food items, and which of them would you actually think would be the more sustainable choice? I'll admit we'll have cheated a little bit because some are more environmentally friendly than others, but still, it's these are only 5 choices. And normally, when you're in the supermarket, I would dare to say that you would probably choose more than 5. So trust, but that also sort of mean that in a way, since it can't be built to say, it can only sort of be slowly evolved. So we have the trust we deserve, I suppose.
Sorry?
We have the trust that we deserve.
We have the trust that we deserve.
The sum of all of,
yes.
yeah.
So on in that study, on the scale of between 1 and 7, where 1 is very low trust and 7 is very high trust in the food chain, the trustworthiness of the majority of actors in the food chain is around 4-ish. So that's, well, neutral at best, right? So we have to work hard to deserve it.
Does that then provide a sort of a huge encouragement to go to work every day, Domagoj? I mean, there's certainly, I mean, obviously having a perfect 10 might be tricky, but there's a lot of work to be done still over time. Does that really motivate?
First of all, everything Milka said is music to my ears. And it's interesting, the EIT study, and EFSA will be publishing the new Eurobarometer data, which confirms a lot of what Milka has just said, especially about the neutrality of the trust in some of the manufacturers and let's say more the producers. The other thing I want to pick up is on the fact of building trust. I mean, this is a €1 million question. The problem is that, the challenge is that there are many types of trust, and then there's many factors that influence trust. And one, if not the most important factor, is that people, some people they trust more in general, and others not so easily, regardless if it's food or anything else. The character is quite influential when it comes to trust and also building confidence. I really think, and I agree with Milka again, that the only thing that institutions and entities can do that work in the food area is to try to behave in a trustworthy manner, and not, I wouldn't say hoping to gain trust, but trying to put processes and actions in place that are trustworthy. And we can unpack what that means today, for example, for an organization like EFSA. I give it an example. As when we did our strategy last year, we actually placed the trustworthiness in our first strategic objective. Our objective is to deliver trustworthy assessment and communication of risk. So we really see it as a priority. But what does it mean when it comes to science of food, of communication of food? I think it's about being participatory throughout and including input from people that we deliver throughout the process. So it's about having also the, let's say, audience-driven approach, that you understand the people you work for. So this can be the customers in the food safety system, the partners of the stakeholders, even the public at large. And when it comes to consumers, and Milka also mentioned about translating science into palatable packages, I mean, the role of the risk communication when it comes to food is also to make the information not just relevant, but also accessible to everyone. And I think this is why we see a bit of a shift in the food safety communication and scientific communication in general, also, of course, backed by the general food law, but we see more use of social media and discourses on social media on food and food safety. We see more communication campaigns. We see people trying to link what are complex scientific matters to everyday food topics. And I think this is a positive trend, and I think we should continue. We shouldn't be downplaying science, but we should be trying to explain science in a way that is relevant and accessible and interesting to people. And it is interesting. It's super interesting. So remember what I said in the beginning about passion and duty. I mean, it's a communication challenge to try to reconcile the two, but I think it's also an obligation, especially when we move towards the sustainable food system, where the duty is not just food safety anymore. The duty will be also sustainability. So the fact of what has to happen is enlarging. And even if sustainability nowadays on an EU average is not the first factor that people will consider when they're buying food, because we have pressing factors such as prices, we have personal factors such as taste, we have the food safety, it's still growing. And there are countries in the EU where this is quite a high factor in importance. So we need to consider this, what we are discussing also today in the panel, as probably the sustainability of the food system becoming one of the determinants of the trust in food in the years to come.
Well, you mentioned, Milka, also the trust or the possible trust in scientists. And it's nice to see that we also indeed have two, and I'm not pointing any fingers at anyone particularly, but at least two recognized scientists from at least two science projects in our panel, Solveig and Pika. From what you've researched or looked at, one of the elements of trust is, of course, that it differs across Europe, but it's also a matter of that the trust might be highest with your local products or producers, yet our products are not necessarily local anymore. How does that influence, maybe Pika or Solveig? How does that influence the trust? Have you found so far, or the trust or the feeling of safety when they actually go about, well, consuming?
Well, I can maybe start. I think,
yes.
I mean, you basically said it. So that's the thing, like, how well do the consumers themselves, and how well we as researchers, when we try to formulate research questions, how well do we actually understand how it is? That's what is local food, what are the consumption habits actually in different countries. And my research project, Toxosource, works on a specific foodborne pathogen. And we did a large survey, multi-center survey in Europe, looking into this with specific questions for that pathogen. And there were quite major differences exactly by region in Europe. So I think it's both for the consumers, but also for all the work we do about it. It's important to
lost audio,
understand.
Pika. I think.
You lost me?
No. Well, we have an audio issue, sadly, Pika.
Oh no.
With you too, Tom.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Try
and
again.
I heard Pika.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. We didn't. Sorry, I think I didn't. Maybe it's just my ears. Sorry. I guess you can confirm that too, Solveig. I mean, the challenges of both understanding the complexity of the food system and trying to to, as you said, Domagoj, and try to have a lot of very complex issue boil down to a very simple choice sometimes, which is almost an impossible exercise.
Yes, and we see that people trust these local foods, but at the same time, it's not in accordance with the real risk. So I guess when it's local and natural, people believe it's safer than it's actually is, and that's of course a challenge explaining that maybe when you use these backyard eggs or harvesting your own mussels or something, than the industrial produced food. So I guess that's a challenge also.
Well, it ties very well into our next theme, which would be food system literacy, understanding complexity. We want people to trust the food that they have to choose, but we also ideally want them to understand that complexity when they make those choices. That requires a high level of food literacy. Can we actually expect people to understand that complexity when we make those choices? We as an industry, or we as a society, build a very complex system, and we demand of people that they understand that complexity. Is that really an expectation that we can meaningfully have of them?
Yeah. Do you hear me now?
Yes.
It's perfect. There was just something. So I think this is a really good question, and I think it should be approached with some kindness, because indeed those food systems, food chains, and all the systems around it, they are really complex. But how I try to see it is actually that complexity gives a lot of opportunities for everyone to contribute to our common understanding of these. And actually, I feel like we really need to collaborate and talk together, like today on this breakfast, about these things and bring the different point of views. So my own background, my focus, I'm happily biased to use a One Health approach a lot. And that's actually really about how the health of us humans, health of other animals, health of the environment and ecosystems, how they are linked. And I mean I cannot say that I understand it all, and I have some understanding, and I really need to talk with other people, and together we create the understanding. And everybody also needs to understand what they don't know, and we can all learn from each other.
So if we have a fairly complex system of producing the food, is it then a good idea, Dorota, maybe to introduce even more complexity in trying to collaborate across different systems, across borders, across all kinds of institutions to go forward? People need to trust not just the local farmer, they need to trust international institutions, they need to trust scientists. There's so many people to trust, and they just want to eat. How can we understand, I mean, meaningfully also, to use complex system to solve complex issues?
Yes, thanks, Lars. That's a very complex question, I have to say.
Well, it's early morning and they are eating, so.
Yes, and everybody had a cup of coffee or tea. Is it a good idea to introduce or inject into the system even more complexity? Yeah, that only calls for an answer, yes or no, and it's a difficult, to just
maybe we should just go
here.
back to having local producers producing their local products. That would be romantic and idyllic, wouldn't it?
And awfully boring.
Oh yes, maybe too. And you wouldn't get those mussels, those wonderful mussels from France either, or whatever. Sorry.
Yes, sorry, I was going to talk about empowering citizens and consumers to be part of the solution, be part of the system, be part of the sustainable and health promoting food system in Europe, globally as well. I mean, it's not just a part of we're just living here in a bubble. And you've mentioned two other projects that are ongoing. I come here today with not only as a representative of EuroHealthNet, so my take obviously is how to make sure all the citizens, all the consumers can be part of the solution and are empowered, and we work together on giving them the skills regardless their socioeconomic status and the inequalities they face, while of course reducing those inequalities. But I come here also with another hat. We are part of a newly launched project called Feast, which is actually the focus of it, the aim of it is to support consumers and support the food systems to transit towards the health and sustainability, so that we are working towards taking on the current lose-lose-lose-win systems, where we have profound profits going to the food industry pockets, while we have to deal, or we are left to deal with the profound negative consequences for the health, society, and the public sector, I'd say, and the environment. And the project aims really to work towards the solutions that win, 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 win. So quarter win. We used to have a project in EuroHealthNet that was working towards the triple solutions: health, equity, environment. Now that's four wins. So yeah, and really the co-creating the solutions with the citizens at the center is the key here. So for that, we have to obviously understand the barriers, the facilitators, and what would it be for everybody to move along, for the system not to leave anyone outside of it, but everybody is kind of taken and supported on the way. And there are multiple ways to do so, hopefully, and the project is going to find out even more so, and exchange the good practices and scale them up and roll them up across the EU.
Yeah.
And I just go quiet here, but I'm
very good. But empowered citizens, I mean, and you Feast, what a wonderful title for a project. As you see with our projects within food, there's often with some catchy titles: Feast, SafeConsume, and maybe not. Toxosources.
Toxosources, yeah.
Yes, but it's important still. But empowered citizens is an awful lot of complexity that we place on these individuals. There must be a huge role also for the system as well to navigate that complexity, so all of the choice is not on the consumer. Is it actually possible for people to contain? I mean, even as a scientist, PK, trying to understand, in your case, toxoplasmosis, that's pretty darn hard. So how can we expect people to understand that? I mean, the people here, they only had 5 different food sources that had to rate from their sustainability, and that was quite hard for them.
I would turn the word hard to more like interesting. So that's the thing. If there's something that is complex and challenging, it's like there's just so many opportunities to look at that, and yeah. And then we need to work together. So I would just repeat that it's not sometimes. I mean, we cannot have the full view of things, and we often, when different fields come together, there's the challenge that there's no common language for that. So it might be difficult to understand each other, or to put these different aspects, like how do we value, how important are they, because we all are biased from our point of view. And I think to bring these different biases together, that's the wonderful mixed salad to eat. Yeah.
A mixed salad. And then speaking of mixed salads, one of the things that the SafeConsume project has looked at is actually the culture of mixing those salads, maybe across Europe, and the actual consumer practice. I mean, are these choices that we're talking about, those safe choices, sustainable choices, does that translate into some safe behavior and across Europe, in European kitchens? Are consumers, and this is a misleading or rhetorical question, I suppose, are they created equal? Do we find a common practice across Europe?
Yes, and now, and it's interesting when you say which countries where you have high trust and low trust, and actually it's maybe those countries with high trust, where people are also most aware about food risks and their practices are safer than in the countries with low trust. And it's kind of strange, but I guess it's maybe a fundamental part of the culture. If you trust everyone around you, and everyone is very aware of risk, then you will also, everyone have these practices. It's a lot of things for people to know about and learn. And in SafeConsume, we are working with tools that can help consumers. We're working with information, but maybe the most important and most difficult part is to improve the skills of people. And then we have to go to the education system, I think, because it's not just telling people what to do, but they really have to understand what they should do. Especially now, when we had COVID, now with the new crisis that we have, you need an understanding, because it's so many different ways of making food and so many different food choices. So you really have to understand how to prepare food safely, not just learn a rule through journalists. I guess that's where people learn about food safety these days. It's in the media.
So something that goes a little bit beyond just simply putting a new trusted food label, EU food label.
Yeah.
But would, in your view, Dorota, would that element, that education, that empowerment, would that actually solve the issue? If only we had, if only, it's a wish, it's a Christmas wish. If only we had informed, empowered consumers, would we then have a sustainable food system?
Well, a very quick and rough, let's say, answer is no. I mean, just investing in skills, literacy, competences, it's just a part of the solution. It really has to be embedded in the wider, the living conditions of in which people then are able or not able to apply the knowledge that they have, the income that they have to their disposal to go to a supermarket or to a local fresh fruit and vegetable market, if there is any in the neighborhood. So it's really, it's just really one element. So it has to be built into a more comprehensive system around people, with the people at the center, to really understand their needs and how the choices are made and the information is applied. So, for example, the new initiative from the WHO, the Behavioral and Cultural Insights, here comes to help. The GRC is also taking up on it. So, yeah, I'd say this is really, in addition to already a plethora of work, the research work going on in Europe on how to do that. This is, so the education skills, it's good, yes, but it's not just the only the silver bullet in this case. Yeah, and actually, I just add something, because recently we, just like probably many other stakeholders present here, participated in a consultation to the Sustainable Food Systems Framework Initiative put on the table by the European Commission, and just last week, the outcomes of the consultation came out. And interestingly, I mean, the majority of the respondents really agree that it is not even sure that provision of information on the sustainability would accelerate the transition to a sustainable food system. And 84% of the respondents, so that really a lot of, many people agree that educated sustainability label of food. So there's still a kind of mixed messages, while they think it wouldn't really accelerate, but they think it would help. So from the consumer's perspective, they think there should be something done, but not just like a one-off a new label put on the product, because that would add to the crowdiness of the health claims, food composition and ingredients on the label already. So we have to be smart in how we want to convince ourselves in this process.
So we're putting our consumers in a fairly challenging situation. survive when they try to navigate well, food safety and sustainable food. And even while we're doing it, maybe we're just we're outsourcing the responsibility for the food system to them, and not be able to simply solve it by having them solve the issue for us. So there's an issue here also, I suppose, of policies and the design of policies. The food challenges that we face, are there simply sort of design flaws, Solveig? Could we design our way out of, or empower our way out of it? It's simply a way of either educating or designing better, and that would be the solution?
Yeah, I think we've tried that for years to just provide safe food, but it is really challenging. For example, for eggs, that's on the top of foodborne outbreaks when it comes to when it's happening in the home. And of course, it has been an improvement in the safety of eggs, but still it will never get to zero. And about, well, I think it's 26% of people eat eggs from backyard hens and what they get locally. So the policy makers can never really make it to a zero level. So I think we have to also not blame the consumer, but we have to have this last line of defense in the food system.
A last line of defense in the food system. But then talking about the food system and design, let's move on to then talking about, I mean, we're here at the European Health Forum Gestein talking about policies. So the design of better policies, I mean, there seems to be a challenging issue here about people wanting something that might be local and trusted, that's easy and simple for them to understand, yet the system that we are building is around them is very much not so. Demanding of the consumers that they can tackle all those choices is hard, especially if we don't provide the education that they need for them to navigate. Designing better policies, I mean, especially, I suppose, some of the people in the room are used to working in a place we call Brussels. How could design of better policies actually, and where would you say we should try to focus some of those efforts? And we're talking perhaps about you also, Domagoj, but we're not talking about your work, but perhaps the framework within that you're working within. Yeah.
Can I try to make a link? So I would like to pick up on what Dorota was saying, and then also Solveig. Literacy, knowledge, education, it is not the answer. It is important. We need to empower people by knowledge, but it is not the solution, because it leaves the responsibility on the individual level. And we cannot afford that. We need to zoom out and shift the responsibility to the level of the community, of the government, of the manufacturers, of the entire food chain. And I would like to remind us all here that Europe's food safety system, which is well recognized globally, did not emerge from good intentions alone. It was driven by strong and clear regulation, and that's where we meet now. And Domagoj was referring to the General Food Law that set the stage for the European food safety regime as we have it now. And just as the General Food Law 20 years ago did that, I think that now the upcoming legislative framework that Dorota was referring to for sustainable food systems must make the food systems healthy and sustainable for Europe. And that can only be done through strong regulation. And I would also like to pick up on what Pika was saying. We must use the One Health principle as a vision, as a driver for this change. We must put the health of people, other animals, and the planet in the center, and away from profit as a driver alone. Dorota was also mentioning the the open consultations on the legislative framework for the sustainable food system. Just a little bit earlier this year, IFA has published also a position paper on why Europe needs a health-oriented food policy, with One Health approach as a driving vision. And we there provide very concrete proposals on how the Farm to Fork strategy and the upcoming Sustainable Food Systems Law can support all of us, all people, in our aspirations to eat healthily and more sustainably. And that can only be done through creating health-enabling food environments. So that has to be regulated. And also that can be done through a nutrition-sensitive agriculture approach. So that's how we would see it from IFA's perspective.
Adding more complexity also to a lot of different policies. And just to allow you to also add some of your complexity, I will ask you to just briefly go to slide 2 and to our next question about policies with the greatest potential to help us transform. Because that was a tour de force already, Milka. Thank you so much. And to add to that, I mean, especially while you go to Slido and look at that, from our 2 scientists in the room, the One Health approach, definitely one that's very important, but looking at science and the element about having trusted science to build policies on, is that one where you think currently maybe for both you, Solveig, and you, Pika, that we do indeed have policies that are built safely and soundly on science?
No.
That was easy.
I would like to say yes, but it could be taking better benefit of the scientific outcomes and more specifically, like really build on that. But I think it's part of the process. I see it positively, but I would say it's all about also creating those interfaces between science, policy science, and also like science consumers. I mean, all of us, how these things link again together. So there needs to be the interfaces and timeliness. That's another thing with these consultations and other ways for different stakeholders and scientists and consumers and all the groups to be involved. So like, it needs to be possible and timed so that it's beneficial, the win-win thinking also there, that when to do that so that it actually really can shape policies.
Lars, may I add something?
Yes, of course, because this is a perfect opportunity to also establish a good trust chain, isn't it, Domagoj?
Yeah, no, I think this is an interesting question about the policy and the science, and of course, let's say the food safety policies are science-based. But I think we've seen a shift with the Farm to Fork strategy, that we have seen the areas where we have priorities in the Farm to Fork strategy really also seeking scientific advice and understanding a bit more on the topics that are just beyond your traditional food chain and that are more in the remit of the One Health approach that Pika was talking about. And I take animal welfare as a great example. I think there has been a lot of emphasis on animal welfare in the Farm to Fork policy. Animal welfare is not your typical food safety topic that you would think of from the top of your head, but it's a topic where a lot of work has been done in science over the past 2 years on looking at how the transport of animals, the cages, etc. And there will be proposals for sort of delivering a legislative comprehensive revision of the animal welfare legislation next year. And what I find also interesting is that all these new areas, well, I wouldn't call them new, but they're very interesting areas for EFSA, because, for example, when we ask people, do they think that the health of plants, animals, and environment impacts human health, they all say, yeah, that's a massive impact. But for us, it's a new type of issues that we are dealing with also in communication, because these are things where people are actually interested to know more. So you're not just talking about, salmonella or pesticide residues, but you're talking about something that has a societal interest, which comes from a different angle. which comes from an angle that, where you talk about sustainability, you talk about, so it's really, I think, a pleasure to work on these areas. And I think seeking scientific, what the Commission has done by seeking scientific advice in EFSA in these areas, I think is a stepping stone towards also having science-based policies and strategies that are not just, regulations to ensure food safety, but are much broader. And I think this is something that we've seen. This is an evolution that we have seen in the regulatory arena.
I think you want to add something, Peter?
I would like to add, just
Look
because
like
now Domakoi was adding even more complexity to this. So I was just wanting to be on his side before you last comment and say, like, now we are adding complexity. I think we are adding things that are interesting, and this gives opportunities to engage new groups of people and stakeholders, actually. So I see it as a positive thing.
You can see from the Slido also some very interesting, the simple solution, just get real. Well, yeah, just do that. I also wonder, that's quite fascinating. Literacy is a diversion. Interesting. And some other policy areas. Literacy is a diversion. Dorota.
Well, yeah. Could be so. I mean, yeah.
So if we interpret "just get real," I mean, there's ways to interpret that phrase. Is that just about?
I think what's probably implied here, and I can see it in it, but that's just my interpretation. It's like, so what, you give people the information, you educate them on this particular topic, huh? Because I see also a point here on general education. Yeah, that's also going, yeah, it could be a part of the health literacy, a kind of wider way of, we don't know anymore how to live in these complex societies that are detached from from the reality. But yeah, so what we invest in information, knowledge, education, etc. If at the end of the day, people have only a certain amount of money to afford or to buy food to cook the meal, if they have infrastructure and if they can pay for the energy in the current climate, yeah. So thinking about healthy and sustainability of the diets that they provide for themselves, for their children, for the families, communities is obviously something you don't think, as you said, people just want to eat at the end of the day. So perhaps there is more that we have to look at, and here it's just taking it out of the narrow zoom on the consumers, the people, individuals, but looking at the supporting systems around there, and that's in the hands of the governance, the national, regional, local governments stepping in and yeah, looking for real solutions for people to allow them, to enable them to eat healthily, sustainably, buy on a local market. Yeah.
So, I mean, literacy is diversion. As you know, diversion is a key component with any magician. So allowing us or diverting us to talk about health literacy, is that perhaps a way of avoiding tackling some of those major issues that hides within all those policies? Is a nice detour into talking about literacy and safe consumers. Milka, is it just a time to get real instead?
Yeah, time to get real. It is indeed drawing, putting responsibility back on the individual. If you say you empower an individual by education or by health literacy and knowledge, that's actually burdening the individual with the responsibility. On the other hand, behavior around food is extremely complex thing, and it cannot be driven only by knowledge. And if you think of knowledge, our food choices are dictated by our, to make the right food choices, we need to have nutrition knowledge, food safety knowledge, food sustainability knowledge. Even people that work in nutrition and food systems sometimes lack knowledge when making their purchase decisions. As I said, behavior around food is extremely complex, and by that I mean it's dictated by cultural, social, economic aspects of our existence, and our choices will also depend on taste, which is still the primary determinant in our food choices, and then price, as Dorota was saying, and then health is maybe only third or fourth concern, and sustainability, well, I don't know where down the list. We do need to make changes in our food environments such that people can make healthy and sustainable choices. And we need to make changes such that healthy and sustainable food choices are the cheapest choices. And that will take some turning the system upside down. And that will take some, I'm afraid I have to use the word revolution, and Martin will not agree with me, but or maybe, like active evolution, very fastened evolution. We are at the tipping point. If we look into our planet, if we look into our societies, we are at the tipping point. It has to happen now. We have no choice.
I would have expected none.
Yeah, I just very quickly wanted to add to what Milka said. The food choices we make are emotional, based on our emotions, and the food industry knows that and takes advantage of that. And one other aspect that hasn't been mentioned here yet is the advertising and marketing, and the lack of regulation or deregulation, sorry, at the moment in this field. And indeed, this being used as a vehicle to put even more responsibility on the individuals by the industry, we're coming together and instead of working towards regulatory approaches, legislative measures, etc., coming up with another yet code of conduct for I know that IFA is part of it, of the initiative. It's just a kind of that takes time, takes a lot of efforts away from what the science also tells us, that codes of conduct, etc., the self-regulation does not work in this particular field, especially when we think about vulnerable consumers, children. Advertising and marketing is a really big and serious problem, and now in the digital environments that our children spend their lives. So that's another piece of work that where we have to really sit on in this to make sure that our food systems transform towards health promoting ones, sustainable ones, supporting the health of the people, planet, animals, society.
A lot of considerations to be had. Domagoj, you wanted to add?
Yes, I have many things to add, but I will focus on two. So first, I wanted to comment on the education and the advocacy. I think at EFSA we're quite keen on communication and understanding the evolution of science communication, and I think we need to learn from the past that the reason we shifted from the one-way institutional communication to a more participatory approach was the fact that it didn't work. Just saying to people, do this, don't do that. So this was an evolution, a shift that we've already lived through once. So which is why I'm saying that, why I agree that education is important, but it's not education coming from institutions to citizens and stakeholders. It's people need to understand the key principle. Sometimes we talk about consumers as if we are not consumers, right? So, so we need to, be exposed and have information available. It could be in curricula, something on food safety. I totally agree with some of the suggestions of the SafeConsume project as well, but it's not the silver bullet. And it will not be the solution. And I agree that the solution will come with regulation and a more holistic thing, because otherwise we risk, you're not gonna, just by sticking something on a product, it will not change the we change the way that we all behave. The other interesting point, I think, that was discussed is this whole thing about the cost and the sustainability, because in a world where, in a crisis we live, where cost is becoming probably the first determinant of what we are buying, what are we going to sacrifice as consumers? I don't think we will probably sacrifice food safety as a choice, because it has, we think about it as having a health impact. Will we sacrifice the taste? Will we sacrifice the nutrition if we need to? Or will someone prefer to sacrifice the sustainability aspect and say, well, this is, if I have to choose the least of it. So I think we need to prepare in what is coming in the upcoming period, with cost driving the food choices, that it's not going to be a simple transition, because simply it's a matter of resources. And I think we need to prepare for a quite strong interplay of all the factors, and seeing which groups of which segments of consumers will be able to make sustainable choices, and maybe, if it's possible to make sustainable choices, if it will be possible to have consumers make sustainable choices, even with all the resource consideration. And I think this is a challenge for all of us working in this remit for the years to come.
Yeah. And looking at the Slido, we have our two top winners, food labeling, the one that you just said wouldn't actually fix anything, Domagoj. And then we have at least one of the cases here, the farm to fork strategy. And speaking about tipping points, I suppose, Milka, if some would, I guess, prefer that in a crisis situation like we're in, to just be able to produce as cheaply as possible, because that would be the simple way of solving this issue. People have to eat. Yet what you're suggesting is, of course, that there is also a slightly more complex solution that would actually lead the sustainable choice to become perhaps the cheapest option. But it also requires perhaps some investment and some hard choices on the policy side.
You can't sort complex issues with single simple solutions. We have to work on it all. Pika was already referring to it. We have to work across different stakeholders intersectorally. We have to attack this issue from all the sides at the same time. And I think it's also important what Dorota was saying and what Domagoj was referring to. We need to co-create this system together with people. We don't have consumers. We are all consumers. I prefer the word people there. But we can only do so by aligning among all stakeholders, and I mean all, and by being consistent and persisting. Just a short reference to what Domagoj was saying about communicating. I said also at the beginning, we cannot afford not to listen anymore. So we have to be, all stakeholders, where the discussion happens. And we need to talk with people and not at people. No unidirectional communication anymore. We need to listen. We need to hear the concerns. We need to answer the concerns. The concerns are legitimate, even if we don't deem them so. And we shouldn't be shying away from emotions. Even in translating science, we should try to appeal to the emotion of people. That's what people buy into.
Does that also mean, I mean, you've sort of hinted at it, Domagoj, and you, Pika, too, you, Dorota, you've all hinted at this element also about that we are mostly talking about the health and well-being for people when we're talking about food, but there's also the health of animals. There's the health of the planet too, to enable a sustainable food system, and not just about whether we would like to eat, I suppose, but also what we eat and how we produce it. Are we good at that at this stage, to balance that too?
I would say we are becoming better in that, and so we are learning. It's a new thing for many, but certainly we are learning. And I would say one thing, just to the previous comment, that listening to the concerns, but also listening to the drivers of different people and stakeholders. Why do they want this change? Why are they willing to contribute and take that energy? So it's not only negative concerns; it's also drivers.
What about lobbying invested interests? I'm sorry, I'm just reading out loud, but that was, of course, yeah. Dorota, yeah. Not about lobbying invested interests.
No.
That would
Well.
also seem like an interesting topic to dive into, though.
What I wanted to say is that, and I think we all agree here that the healthy, sustainable food systems and the policies around it at the EU level is already a complex issue. It is increasingly getting complex, etc. But then what about the national level then? Like if it's already complex here and it gets down. So I think we have to give the national governments, the regional governments also tools to work in the system and with the people / consumers to make this transition. And there are also a number of initiatives at the EU level, at the member states level, let's say, that build the capacity to take what's there at the EU level and translate it into international policies. One of these is, for example, an ongoing joint action on the exchange and promotion of good practices in the nutrition and food policies, best remap, looking into advertising and marketing to children, public procurement, and food reformulation. There is a new joint action in the making as we speak on health determinants, NCDs / cancer. The NCDs initiative, Healthier Together. So there is loads of stuff out there. It's also we have to make sure the link is being made and nurtured between the EU level and the national governments, the public health authorities in the member states, so that we don't only talk in Brussels or in the EU bubbles, but discussions trickle down. I know it's not a popular term, but kind of diffuse across and our context related and needs and meet the needs of the governments to be able, for example, to stand up to the vested interests and the lobby of the industry and so on and so forth.
Yeah. So even if trickle-down economy doesn't work, maybe trickle-down policies might.
The economy of well-being.
Yeah. But one of the questions from our audience that we haven't touched upon much, but we can just have time to do that a little bit. What we've discussed, I suppose, is about our current system in a sudden way. And one of the shifts that we see is, of course, the trend towards moving away from animals as a protein source and towards plant-based. Is that then sort of simply one of the solutions? And if so, I mean, are people ready to make those choices, or simply just not choosing, I don't know, beef, chicken? It doesn't really mean that the plant-based choices that they have are necessarily sustainable, but are they able to just simply pick the plant-based and then they're good to go? Is that either the solution, or is that just adding another complexity to the issue, or a diversion even?
Okay, what kind of answer do you expect?
The simple one.
There is no simple one.
No, I mean, I don't have insight into data in, how strong is the trend towards plant-based diet. That is the solution, not the solution. One of the solutions for the more sustainable food systems, our choices. But then again, our choices have to be part of a well-regulated environment. The shift, the transition will happen. We need time, we need education, we need health promoting environments, but that won't sort all our problems.
So I guess that was a good way of answering that particular question about the vegan options. It is also a field with some complexity, even though of course it has some solutions.
Well, if you think of the land use, water use, and the rest of the factors that you use to determine the sustainability of certain food production, some plant-based foods can have more impact on the environment than like animal-based foods, depending on from how far we import them, depending on the way we grow them. I mean, it's a super complex issue, and as I said, even people that work in food systems have difficulties measuring that. Then imagine how difficult it is for the consumers. Just imagine local and seasonal, how difficult that is for people to figure out that sometimes something that is local is not more sustainable, because just it's not, well, as I said, another complex issue that we need to work on from all different angles.
So we've been definitely talking about a lot of complexities, challenges, as Pika might say, but thinking then maybe also about solutions, paths forward. Solveig, paths forward from your perspective, instead of adding more complexities, what would be some of the solutions that you would really hope for? Either, people are listening today that they should try to implement tomorrow or in the coming years, either from your, in your day job, you of course are a good food scientist, but either from SafeConsume or from Nofima, what would be some of the paths forward or ways that we should collaborate more that you would have us do?
I think, well, you were mentioning regulation as very important, but we should, and it has been also mentioned, of course, the infrastructure and the possibility for people to make safe and nutrient foods, because we have some parts of Europe where people don't have access to running water, when they turn off the refrigerator during the night to save money and so on. So I'm afraid now with new high prices on power, high prices on food, that more people will be in that category that don't have the possibility to these healthy choices that we are talking about here in Gastein. so that's something that we should be aware of, that it's not only to choose a healthy lifestyle, a sustainable lifestyle for everyone. We've been talking about education and information for consumers, and it's important. And we in SafeConsume, we have looked for new ways of education, such as gamification. That did work. So we should go into Google Play and look for the SafeConsume game and check out if you have a good kitchen hygiene. So we could also look for new technologies or ways to make safer food or better, or make it easier for people to understand what is a sustainable choice and what is a safe choice. Although it's complicated. So it's not one solution. We cannot just have an app and then we're fine. We have to choose this through very many means, both policies and for everyone.
But let me ask you then, Pika, key paths forward that you would prefer? More scientists, more science. No, I'm sorry, I'm teasing.
Not only scientists, I would say more collaboration. So I would repeat that word, and I would turn, there was the let's get real. I would say let's One Health. I would turn it that way. That would be a way forward.
Let's One Health. That sounds like a cue for you too, Domagoj.
Actually, I was the one that wanted to say more science. No, I'm kidding. What I think is important, and I've hinted on this before, is as the food system evolves, as the challenges evolve, the science evolves, but whatever happens remains science-based. And there, I think there's two components. One is that even if we move to assessing different diets, different the aspects of One Health that are not maybe traditional food safety science, the science will evolve and stand to support all the choices and the decisions. But I think as scientific organization, where that where I'd say scientists enjoy trust in the food chain, the co-creation is critical. So I think the job of an institution like EFSA to stay at par with the developments and be prepared to support science where in whatever direction let's say the food system challenges go, at the same time really being participatory and ensuring that and I think I'm quite encouraged by this panel because we have a lot of different actors here this morning in this panel.
In the room too.
Yes, as well. And I think we are all discussing, and for me, the best takeaway of this panel is that I think we are all more or less aligned with the vision, no? So I think seeking solutions will be a joint effort.
Very good. Thank you. Dorota, obviously you're kicking off the FEAST project, so it's kind of hard to summarize the conclusions at this point. But since you're kicking off this project, especially that we're talking about Let's One Health and more science, so at least you're off to a good start. What would be your key expectations, at least, to the discoveries from FEAST or the current or the upcoming work that you'll be doing? What are you hoping that will definitely uncover as path forward?
Well, the central part of the project is this, co-creation, as I said, and the living labs and looking for innovative solutions, so finding them or inventing them, including the social innovation, so socially innovative tools, programs, initiatives that can be then tested and scaled up and rolled out across Europe. And I think, looking for the barriers and facilitators in this process with that work for the people in different conditions they live. I don't want to say that specifically that word for the vulnerable populations, that people in vulnerable living conditions or vulnerable situations. So just the underpinning behavioral and cultural factors that are helping people to move along in this transition period, let's say. So that's for the next 5 years.
Or beyond even. Milka, key paths forward?
Okay, very shortly, or not. I think we agree that the change will not come on its own, and that if we are to reach healthy and sustainable food systems, they must be regulated with the well-being of people in mind. But in doing so, I really strongly believe that taking the One Health lens will be critical for two reasons. It will help us better understand and appreciate the interconnectedness between the health of people, animals, and the planet, the environment. And also it will help us realize the co-benefits that we can achieve while working towards safe, healthy, equitable, sustainable food systems. So that is, what is it, Dorota? Your four wins. That's what we need to achieve. Yeah.
4 wins, indeed. We've been talking a lot about the different. It's a tall order, wonderful menu. Sorry. We've been diving into a lot of complex issues and certainly also some unity among you, among a number of issues, One Health and science as one of them. We'll be wrapping up this session on sustainable food system and the co-creation of them. It's really nice to see such a huge potential for co-creation across different institutions and borders, especially as the co-creative element is one that we really, really need, as you've been talking about. I find it very interesting to see that some of what we've been talking about today. Is of course that trust is central and essential for all of us. Yet some of the focus in trying to build that trust by adding empowerment or adding more education might be in a way a diversion in trying to outsource the complexities to the individuals, when really some of those hard choices about sustainable policies are not for consumers, but for people in not standing in their kitchen or in the supermarket making those choices. And yet we want, of course, all of those new policies to be both one, science-based and possibly one health-based, looking beyond only, not just the health of humans, but also of animals and the planet too, to do that. But there's energy in the room because we just had a wonderful breakfast and food for thought. And I thank you all for coming, physically or virtually. That was nice. And I wish you a continued wonderful day. And let's continue this discussion about sustainable food system beyond, I think, later today too, Dorota. Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.